Well, all four of the gospel writers are going to be recording this account, and they say it's a desert place belonging to the city of Bethsaida, near Bethsaida, which is the northeast corner of the Sea of Galilee. And desert, the Hebrew word used there, from which the Greek word comes, the concept is an uninhabited place, outside of the town. So they're just outside of the town. And a couple of them mention, even though it's called a desert place, there's much grass there. John's account says there's a lot of grass. Well, we don't usually associate a desert with a lot of grass. It means a tract for pasturing flocks.
No, the JST adds that word solitary.
Solitary.
Uninhabited. It's an open space.
Well, and an important point to remember, too, is this is Passover time. We're talking about late March, possibly early April, and the rainy season has just ended, and it is extremely green over there. It looks like Ireland.
I was going to say, it's amazing.
Just beautiful.
Because most tourists see the Holy Land at times when it's brown and very dry, but it's very, very lush, particularly at this time of the year.
You know, this is another misconception. When you read the New Testament, you get the idea that the Savior always goes out into the wild deserts where there's nothing in order to prepare himself. But really, he chooses some of the most beautiful settings to prepare himself and his spirit
apostles.
And the apostles for the things that are coming.
Rather than desert, it's deserted.
Deserted.
In other words, it's far away from the town.
Private.
In fact, I think that phrase that we just read, where he says, "Come ye yourselves," or "Come with me apart," meaning apart from everyone and everything else. Now, why were they going to go to the solitary place?
The gathering is to rest. They've just come back from missionary work.
Okay.
Missionaries need a rest now and then. He's going to have a...
This is like
using that term.
It's like a zone conference almost, where they've been out working hard. Now they gather together to share with each other their successes and their testimonies and to prepare.
Okay, so it says there that they're going to rest for a while. And then, as we come down a little bit further, I think there's another reason why he takes them to a solitary place, not just for rejuvenation, but I think it's also a mournful period of time. I think that the Savior feels terrible, and he needs a little bit of space, what we would call space, to mourn the loss of John.
Yeah.
And so while they're in this desert place,
You know, doesn't that teach us a lot about life? I mean, this is the master of all, the God of the universe, who in his mortal life and probation needs time to prepare, needs time to console, needs time to heal, to go forward with greater strength. It just tells me that we constantly try and give 110% to everything we do, and you can burn out.
absolutely.
There's a time when you need to be renewed, there's a time to be recharged, there's a time to refresh, and then there's a time to go back out and hit the work.
Luke's account of his ministry especially keeps bringing that out. He goes up into the hills, or he goes down by the lake, or after every major event, he's going out by himself for a while because he wants to
Be with his Father.
Father.
Yeah. Well, what happens as he takes his apostles, and they're going to have this rejuvenation time, resting time, as well as perhaps a teaching, preparing, spiritually edifying time. What happens?
They don't get it. In Mark 6, verse 34, it just teaches so much about the Savior. He's seeking the rest, he's seeking the opportunity, but when he sees the people gathered, he's moved with compassion. And that's the Savior, constantly seeking to help, constantly seeking to serve.
That's a very good point. Verse 34, and he was moved with compassion because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So even though we would say it's his day off, because he sees that they need it, he continues to teach.
You know, it reminds me of the end of the Book of Mormon, when Mormon, in Mormon 9, writes his son Moroni a letter, and it's discouraging. This is civilization's going down, they're without sail or anchor, they're all going to be lost. And he says, we have a duty to perform whilst in this tabernacle. You know, we've got an opportunity to serve, and we need to fulfill that. And the Savior feels that very intensely. When he sees people without a shepherd, what could be more painful to the shepherd of Israel?
Keep your finger in Mark 6, because we're going to come back to it. But in John chapter 6, just a little different perspective, and I want to set the stage for this miracle. And so in John chapter 6, in verse 3, and it says, "And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And verse 4, I think this is the point that I'd like Kelly or you or Ray to comment on. It says, "And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh." Now, why is that important in the setting of this miracle that we're going to read about? They've gone to this apart place, this solitary place. It's really not near or very close to a major city by any means. What does it mean?
The Passover is a time of messianic expectation. The Jews thought that their Messiah would finally come at Passover time. That's their tradition. So it's Passover time, and notice in verse 15, they want to come and take him by force to make him their king. Well, the Messiah is going to be their king, of course, and overthrow the Romans, reestablish a great Jewish kingdom. So
what
now's
better
the time
than Passover?
Especially when they see this miracle, they realize he must be. He has to be our Messiah.
Yeah.
So let's make him a king.
And then also, the point is that they have no place, there's no fast food places close by. They are in a place where he has purposely taken them away from the things of the world, and they don't have any means to go and buy food. And so as we see in verse 6, I think it's interesting, the disciples are saying, now, we've got a lot of people here. In fact, how many are there? We think of it feeding the 5,000, but that's not really what the scriptures say.
5,000 men.
Plus
And,
women.
besides
not
women
counting
and
women
Yeah,
and
so
children.
we're looking at a huge
group.
multitude.
Yeah.
And as they are now thronging there, they're concerned, or what are we going to do? And when shall we buy bread that they may eat? But look at the next verse in verse 6. The question is more rhetorical than really concerned about the vending machines or the concessions at this event.
It's like the question you asked the brother of Jared. Will you believe what I am about to say to you? That's a test of faith.
Yeah. And so he's setting the stage by saying, where are these people going to get their food? And then verse 6 says specifically, "And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do." And so now we're all familiar with the story that from the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, they're not going to be able to eat other than that. Okay.
Interesting little details along the way. All 4 of them are writing about this, but John is the only one who mentions they had 2 small fishes and 5 barley loaves. Well, barley is the grain for the poorer people. So he's making the point that this is insufficient in quantity and quality.
This wouldn't
This is not good
even
food.
warrant the
No.
blessing of the refreshments.
And
in
yet,
other words.
and yet in verse 11, he gives thanks. He's so gracious, and so appreciative. This tells me something else about the Savior. His character, he's more powerful than nature. Sometimes we talk about Mother Nature as if there's some being up there who has control over God.
But he's Father Nature.
But God controls, he commands dead fish to multiply and replenish and feed a multitude. He commands bread to appear that hasn't been harvested or gathered or ground or baked or risen